President Obama has just changed up the numbers in the Middle East. Numbers of U.S. troops. President Obama in Germany with European leaders this morning, where he announced the biggest expansion of U.S. ground troops since the Syrian civil war began. This, of course, dealing with the threat posed by ISIS.
Right now, the most urgent threat to our nations is ISIL. And that's why we're united in our determination to destroy it. And just as I've approved additional support for Iraqi forces against ISIL, I've decided to increase U.S. support for local forces fighting ISIL in Syria.
By 250, yes. Retired U.S. Navy Admiral James Stavridis, the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, is no stranger to military conflict, having overseen operations in Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya. He joins us now in a Fox Business exclusive. Admiral, adding 250 additional U.S. troops as sort of a shirt tail to what's going on already, is that going to make a difference?
I don't think it'll make any immediate tactical difference, Liz. Of course, this is a business show. Think of it as leverage. When you bring 250 more, the leverage is the training, the mentoring they can do with the Syrian opposition. That's hardly been a success story thus far. Over time, it might impact. In the short term, don't look for any big twist in the story.
Yeah, training takes a lot of time, doesn't it? And I sit there and I think to myself, well, how much time when you've got the Russians descending, the Iranians are making all kinds of chess moves as well. Help me see what this will do.
I think it will do very little, to be candid with you. Really, we need to take this in an earlier step, which is Iraq. We need to get Mosul back from the Islamic State.
Well,
why? Because that's where their funding and their finances coming from.
Why then did the president do this? There has to be some point.
I think it is a strategic signal. He was in Europe. He's trying to encourage the Europeans to come into this with us, and so he's stepping it up. Although I think it is too little, and it's not too late, but it's too little and too incremental, Liz. We need to move more boldly.
Well, does that encourage NATO, you having been the supreme leader of NATO?
I think it does. Every big NATO operation, including Afghanistan, Libya, the Balkans, piracy, all the things I led as the Supreme Allied Commander, required U.S. leadership. This will be no different. I don't think 250 is enough of a leap, but it's better than zero.
Okay. You know, Americans are touchy about these kinds of things because you remember as well as I do what happened in 1970 when Richard Nixon, of course, sent more troops in what many called a covert war into Cambodia, spilling over into Cambodia because the Viet Cong was amassing along that border between Vietnam and Cambodia. Is this that? Help us see through this, because we want to make sure that this is not the beginning of something that resembles what happened in 1970.
Let me give you a couple of differences. First is what we're doing right now. It's the enormous change in transparency that's provided by not only network coverage 24/7, but also the social networks, cyber, and everything else. Secondly, the Islamic State does pose a direct threat to the United States in a way that, frankly, is very hard to draw a line from the Cambodian-Vietnam conflict. Yeah. And thirdly, like it or not, we've got experience in this part of the world at this point. I think we can be reasonably effective, but not if we're going to do this incrementally and with such timidity.
The Belgian metro station, the Brussels metro station, just reopened 1 month after being attacked by ISIS sympathizers and people who had been trained by ISIS. You know, have these European nations done what they really need to do, the hard but smart work to prevent another attack like the one we saw in Brussels?
No, they have not, Liz, and they've not done it in two dimensions. In terms of in Europe, they're still not sharing intelligence properly. They're not transferring information easily. They're not connecting the various organs of their governments that need to be talking together. It's still 28 different cultures, 14 different languages. They are not making those connections. The second failure is what we just discussed. At the end of the day, we're not going to solve the Islamic State in Europe. That's treating the symptoms. We've got to go to the cause. That's Raqqa, Syria.
Do you think we should put thousands of troops on the ground in Syria?
Let's keep it in perspective. We had 150,000 troops in Iraq, 140,000 troops in Afghanistan. I would not advocate a deployment remotely resembling that. But I would say 10 to 15,000 troops. You can probably get 5,000 of those from the allies. Yes, we should put those troops on the ground in Iraq and bleed them into the crisis in Syria. It's a two-part problem. Got to start in Iraq, but we're going to have to get it done in Syria.
Admiral James Stavridis, not making us feel more comfortable with the situation, but that's not your job anyway. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, Liz.
Anytime.